Back to the daily grind, and y'all know we gotta talk about this. But before we do, make sure you hit subscribe if you're new and hit thumbs up if you're not wearing your clown shoes, cause you know what time it is. It's food time!
MMA.
The UFC has officially announced Vitor Belfort's retirement bout versus Lyoto Machida at UFC 224 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and this fight makes all the sense in the world. Both of these guys are former UFC legends at the end of their careers, still in the UFC, both in the middleweight division. Both of these guys also from Brazil, fighting in Brazil. You know, the fight makes perfect sense. But a lot of fights, it makes sense. So for this fight to happen, it tells me a couple of things. One of them is Michael Bisping might have pissed off the UFC. Because if you recall, the UFC tried to make Vitor Belfort versus Michael Bisping the rematch. Made all the sense in the world for UFC London. But Michael Bisping said, nope, I'm not giving Vitor Belfort the satisfaction of fighting me again. Even though the UFC and Vitor Belfort and the fans wanted to see the fight. The fans is really, you know, people who wanted to see that fight. So Michael Bisping really said, nah, I'm not fighting Vitor Belfort. Sorry, guys. So then Machida Evans was pitched. And that fight was talked about for a little while. That fight never came to fruition between Machida Evans and Michael Bisping. And then the day before tickets went on sale at UFC London, Michael Bisping tweeted and said, hey guys, I'm 100% not fighting at UFC London, so don't buy tickets if you're expecting to see me. Now in my head, I'm thinking, damn, you know, I don't know if he's mad at the UFC or if he's trying, you know, if that's like a power move on his part. Like, I don't know why you would do that, because even, yeah, if the UFC is going to announce you're not on the card, it doesn't seem like, you know, the way Michael Bisping said, it seemed like it might rub the UFC the wrong way. Like, hey, don't buy tickets if you're expecting to see me. Like, anytime a fighter's telling fans to not buy tickets, it just might rub the UFC the wrong way. On top of not accepting a fight that the UFC and the fans wanted versus Vitor Belfort, on top of not coming through and fighting on UFC London. I'm just giving you a bunch of reasons why the UFC could have went ahead and gave Vitor Belfort the Lyoto Machida fight instead of Bisping, because both Belfort and Bisping have announced that their next fight is their retirement fight. And after Lyoto Machida won his last fight versus Eric Anders, he called out actually Michael Bisping in the octagon and said, Michael Bisping, I'm here for you. So, you know, usually when you call out a guy in the octagon like that, a lot of the times it works for you, especially if the fight makes sense. So I thought, you know, but Machida versus Bisping, Machida finally got the opponent he wants. The fight's gonna happen. But no, the UFC gave that perfect opponent for Bisping to Belfort. Still a great opponent for Machida. I mean, hey, maybe Machida can either win or lose here, and then I still go fight Bisping in the future. Because one of the things that also could have, you know, been factored into this is maybe Michael Bisping didn't want to fight so soon after being knocked out by Kelvin Gastelum. We know Michael Bisping was knocked down and then choked out by George St. Pierre, and then like 3 weeks to 4 weeks later went on to fight Kelvin Gastelum in the main event of UFC Shanghai, where he took that fight on short notice and replaced Anderson Silva. You know, he did the UFC a favor there in that case, but also himself a favor. I believe he did reach out and say, hey, I want the fight. So I mean, it did help the UFC, but also helped himself. So what I'm saying with that is maybe he just didn't want to fight so soon. UFC London, I believe, is in a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks. And so, you know, he probably wants to take the proper time to heal up, which he did not do after his George St. Pierre fight. You don't want to, you know, get dropped and then knocked out too, you know, and then take another fight right after that, especially if you're trying to go out on a good note. So that could be what it is here, but either way, whatever was going on with Michael Bisping's retirement fight, we do know Vitor Belfort's retirement fight will be versus Lyoto Machida at UFC 224 in Brazil. Big fight for what should be a big card. I mean, even when the UFC goes to Brazil on Fox Sports 1, they usually stack the card. So I'm sure the pay-per-view is going to be, you know, pretty stacked as well. There's talks of Amanda Nunes versus possibly Raquel Pennington, or maybe another, you know, Amanda Nunes versus another contender at bantamweight. We'll see what happens. But with that being said, man, it is what it is. Let the full-time family know what you think about Vitor Belfort versus Lyoto Machida at UFC 224 in the comments. I'm out.
Da 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 da. It's the motherfucking D-O-double-G.